Hello and welcome back to Building on a Budget Models. I'm Thomas and this is the full build video of the Hasegawa 1/24 Subaru Impreza WRX rally car. My friend Jason had built this replica of Colin McRae's car for his dad Ian to enter Retro Rallycross events. Since his dad was turning 60, Jason asked me to build a 1/24 replica for his birthday, so I got to work. With the interior, I did the main bulk of it in TS51 Racing Blue and the door cards in semi-gloss black X18. Now, rather than the two roof vents, the replica only had one, so I drilled some holes in the centre of the roof instead of the intended ones, and then used a little bit of super glue gel to fit the vent into place. Pretty happy with that. After a light prime of Tamiya Fine White, I then sanded down some mould lines before giving it a heavier coat. And then I gave it a few coats of TS51 Racing Blue. Firstly a light coat, then a heavier coat, and I didn't record the third coat. But this is how it looked at the end, and I was really happy with the colour. Now, when it came to the interior, unfortunately, the model was left-hand drive, and the real car is right-hand drive. However, I've still used details from this to try and get the interior as accurate as possible. I sprayed this in red enamel. There were no decals for the fire extinguisher, but I found a spare FIA decal that I wasn't going to be using and put that on instead. There is a red kick plate which goes near the pedals. I did this using some aluminium tape which I coloured red with a Sharpie. Now the roll cage comes in many parts. The diagonals across the door kind of need to be clipped together like this, and once they were in position I put some glue down there to secure them. Now it has this red vinyl material for the seat belts, and the guide inside the instructions tell you how long they need to be. These lengths are actually far too long, and so I'll need to trim them later on. Used tablet blisters like these are a great place to put super glue. Here's the photo etch fret. Now I initially tried to put it together like this. I found this was quite fiddly, but it did work in the end. Then once I'd pulled through the straps, I added some super glue underneath. This is fiddly business, but it looks really good when finished. Now, because these have photo etch on both ends, you need to feed one through and then attach the other one. I also found that the photo etch went on much better if you just left it on the fret like this, which meant you didn't have to hold on to it. As you can see, they're very small. Now there were some decals for the seats which I made, like the OMP logo, which you can see here. For the Flitspeed logos I used white decal paper with a blue background and then yellow writing. I found that transparent decal paper just didn't show up on the dark blue. I then moved on to the intended kit decals, which I'm happy to say did work, even though they were looking a little worse for wear. It's important to look at the real example of the car to get these to be positioned as well as possible. Also, micro sole and a craft knife is very useful to prevent silvering. Especially in places like this where it goes over the fuel cap. Microsole really helps it fit into those panel lines. For some of the sponsors, Pirelli had been removed, so I cut the Pirelli logo from the top, and these fit into place just as they look on the car that Jason made. The 555 kind of barcode, whatever it is very difficult to go down on the bonnet because it goes over two of the vents. And also these switch off signs are in a different position on the real car. I used the Repsol logos, but then I was intending to cover up the Repsol writing with some sponsors which I'd print later. I painted the spoiler separately and now used a little dab of super glue on each side to fit it into place. The dashboard I did in anthracite, and then the kind of vents were in semi-gloss black. I also sanded down the passenger side to remove some of the kind of computer parts which weren't a feature in Ian's car. Then used some red and yellow on the end of a cocktail stick to add some of the detail to the switches. I printed off 180 and Flitney, just as it was on the dashboard of the real car, except on the other side. I'm happy to say that the dials decal fit really nicely. Neither of the two steering wheels in the kit looked like the Momo one which was used in Ian's car. Found I had this one left over from a Peugeot 206 kit that I made, and it looked pretty good. The seat fits onto a frame done in Tamiya flat aluminium and then slots into the car nicely. I then fed the seat belts around the back of the roll cage and glued them into place, trimming off the excess. I also printed off some decals for the RSS logos that went on the seat belts themselves. I added a couple of little dots of yellow to simulate the Momo decals, which would be way too small to print. I used some aluminium tape to do the mirror, and the roll cage then slotted into place quite easily, done in the same blue as the rest of the body. The custom decals were high quality images that I found on the internet, which I then edited using the methods linked above. I used some different shades of blue to try and match up to the colour of the car as best as possible. Cut the decals close to the edge so that there wasn't so much sort of plain blue. The brake calipers were done in red gloss, the discs in aluminium, and then the centres in gunmetal. These were in aluminium, and then I did the springs in red gloss as well. This part of the front wheels doesn't go together very well, so super glue is needed here. This is mainly aluminium, gunmetal, and a semi-gloss black. These parts here are done in the same colour as the rest of the undercarriage, so you could have glued them in already and then sprayed them. The pins are in nice positions for this to clip in quite easily, and then you could add a little bit of glue to the underside. Unfortunately, the engine detail will later be covered up mostly with the skid plate, but you can choose to leave that off should you want to. There's a rear skid plate here which goes over part of the rear axle. Remember not to glue the front wheels into place so that you can still operate the steering if you'd want to. And then the bottom of the suspension then goes in over the top, keeping the axles in place. and then the same for the rear suspension as well. The exhaust tip was kept in chrome silver, but the rest was done in a kind of anthracite over silver to give it a kind of worn look. Now the radiator at the front I chose to flip in order to make it flat, and then I used a white Flitspeed decal over the top, which was later covered in matte clear. Now the window masks here are unlabelled, so it's important to compare them to the windows themselves to get them right. Put them on the inside. I then masked off the outside with broad tape and gave it a couple of coats of black from the inside for the window trims. Now then there's some thick vinyl to cut into the mudguards. The little outlines here are really useful. However, the vinyl is kind of shiny on one side whereas matte on the other, so it's important to make sure that they all look uniform. Pretty happy with how this turned out, and it's good that you can always just compare the sizes and shapes to the templates on the book. Now the tyres had a little bit of a mould line seam, so I gave it a light sanding with some 400 grit. The wheels were done in gold metallic enamel from a spray can, and then I added extra details like the nuts in iron paint by Revell, and the air intake and the centre in matte black by Revell. You can add a little definition using panline accent like this, and then speedline decals were added to the wheels once they'd been put onto the car. Pretty happy with that. Now this car had been given 3 coats of TS13. Once that set, I then went on to adding details like silver paint in the headlights, and also the STI logos on the car that Jason made were pink, so I tinted these by adding some pink Sharpie. The outsides of the headlights were done with some black Sharpie to simulate the rubber trim, and then they were glued in place using some Bob Smith Super Gold glue. The rear lights were done in solid red plastic, so I put some red spray enamel over the top of these to simulate that look. Again, these were glued in place using Bob Smith Super Gold. The decals have gone down really nicely with the extra gloss coat. The window trim I used Tamiya curved masking tape like this, and then X18 semi-gloss black. Remember to push the tape down with a cotton bud to make sure that it fits the lines well. I found 3 square clear parts in my spare box to make these 3 fog lights, and then gave the interior a final quality control look over before putting it inside the car. The glass had some Super Gold Plus put on for a little while to let it set into place, and then I assembled the car itself. Once I was happy the car had been put together, I used this 1/48 RAF style lettering to write Flitney on the rear window. It wasn't a perfect scale, but it's very difficult to find the right one, and I couldn't print it myself because I can't print in white. Again with the sun strip, which I used the template from the decals to help me get the right size and shape. This has the logo of Retro Rallycross, which is one of the championships which Ian has driven in. The wing mirrors were done in semi-gloss black, and there are little mirror parts from the photo etch fret which were glued in place using some super glue. Bob Smith Super Gold Plus was used here to fix the windows to the clear parts without causing any damage. Similarly, I used Bob Smith Super Gold to attach these photo etch bonnet clips, and the skid plate, which was done in silver, I then weathered by using a little bit of matte black and matte brown, dry brushed to simulate the sort of scrapes that the car might experience on a rallycross event. And here it is. I'm pretty pleased with it. As I said before, it's not 100% accurate to the real car, but I've really enjoyed doing this. Building replicas of real-life cars is something I'd like to do more of in the future, and I certainly feel like I've developed my decal skills quite a lot in the process. I really hope that Ian has a very happy birthday and he likes his gift, and I wish him and the Flitspeed team all the best in their next rallycross endeavours. This build required about 15 to 16 custom decals, all sized and in the right colour to match the bodywork or the real life logos. So it was quite a bit of effort, but I'm glad I went to it because I'm pretty pleased with how it's turned out. That about wraps it up here. Thanks a lot for watching. Please do comment, like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon to stay notified for future builds. And thanks for watching.